Hello there, you guys. Hello, hello, hello. I'm joined again here
Hello,
by,
everybody.
International Master Georgi Orlov. Great guy, amazing player, and we got some games for you guys to check out today. So, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and go like this. You have control of the screen. Go ahead, let's see what we got here.
All right. Hello again, everybody. So we're going to continue today in our pawn break theme. And in the previous classes, we looked at the pawn breaks in a center with a couple of pawns. In a queen pawn opening setup, we've looked at the isolated pawn break. And today we're going to look at the Sicilian pawn breaks. So in the
Yay.
Sicilian, realistically, only two pawn breaks exist. One is when white plays e4, e5, or f4, f5, actually, depending on the position. And the other one is when black counter strikes with e6, e5, or d6, d5. So really,
Let's see some arrows. If you use the arrow, if you like hold right click.
yeah, you can basically do something like this, or for black, you can do something like that. So realistically, not that many different possibilities here. Now, if black pawn is back there, then white sometimes could play e4, e5. And actually, the pawns E and F in Sicilian are critical pawns for white to have, because until those pawns move up, all the white pieces are basically kind of restrained. Like if you look at the layout, what does the bishop on d3 need? Some extra space, because what is that bishop currently doing? Well, attacking the back of its own pawn. Very
Yeah.
exciting job, but not very productive.
Yeah.
The same thing for a dark square bishop on c1. If you look at that one, what does he need? Well, probably not the pawn on f4. So he probably needs something else to be present. And black, respectively, black has a bishop on e7 that is at this point contained and can only realistically just protect the knight and the pawn, not much else. All other pieces are also sort of, I guess, prisoners of the pawn chain, I would say. Going back a little bit in the game, this is a game played by our wizard of chess, Mikhail Tal. And going back to the position in the beginning, the opening was Sicilian Najdorf, where black played e5, obviously taking that pawn would allow relatively quick queen trade, where white basically cannot really have any sort of advantage to even think about. So Tal retreated to f3, which is kind of a standard move. Knight went to d7.
I'm sorry. Can,
And
can we go back and check it out just one more time? Just from move one. Can we just see it again?
right here.
No, just from the very first move, just e4.
Oh yeah, this was a Sicilian Najdorf.
And
So
and
if we
a
know Najdorf, there's lots of different ways to play.
and a6, if you're kind of new to chess, must look sort of unusual and everything, but it's a kind of a main move here. And why is that?
Well, I think I may have told this story before in some chess class, but generally speaking, Najdorf in this position used to play e6. And in the games against Paul Keres, another very famous chess player from Estonia, a lot of people suffered after g4. The pawn would go and chase the knight away, the bishop would go to g2, the f pawn would go up, castling would be played, and lots of challenges would come up. Just say, for example, something like this. Now, who wants to castle to the king side? Raise your hand. Not that many, not that many folks would. You can also play a little bit less ambitiously. We can, for instance, you can play bishop e3, bishop g2, then play g5 on h4.
All right, so
But
I
it
I,
is
I get the
obviously a
g4.
dangerous position.
I get the g4 is a strong move, but what the heck does that have to do with the move a6?
Now, here's the tricky part. What does white do if black plays a6? He needs to play a move. What kind of a move? He can play bishop e2. That means that the bishop couldn't go to g2 anymore. He could play bishop e3, in which case we could hit him with knight g4, for instance, or the same e5. And If he plays f3, then obviously playing g4 and g5 will not have the f-pawn support. So it's actually kind of a little bit of a lack of really good possibilities that would allow g4 to be a productive move.
That's
Of
interesting.
course,
Yeah.
of course, Bob Fischer actually addressed that problem by playing h3 against Najdorf, and after b5, he defeated him in a very famous game after knight d5. That was actually quite an exciting game in its own right.
Got it. Got it.
And I think people still play h3. And I was thinking, what should Black do? I would, in this position, probably play g6 and after g4 play bishop g7. Basically, swing to a dragon. But that is obviously a different ballgame and completely different situation.
Yeah.
So a6 is actually a way for Black to wait out until White makes a commitment with one of the bishops of some kind. And that could be bishop g5, that could be bishop e2, bishop e3, bishop c4. There's a variety of moves, but any of those moves would make playing further g4 a little bit more challenging.
Right. So like half of those kind of it's White's putting a cog in his own a monkey wrench in his own cogwheels, right? Half of the moves he has available means that he can't go g4. Like if he goes here, a natural move, like that on the after here. If he goes with this, now he can't really go g4 as much. Well, I mean, hold on, then he's supporting it. So why can't he go here and then g4?
Well, let's say after something like a popular e6, if you play g4, people do that, but then you have to be dealing with, say, for instance, things like that. And now you can't really play any sort of bishop b5 check. That square is unavailable. If you play g5, you lose e4. If you play a5, they play knight d7, and now your pawn kind of sticks out in a way that doesn't seem to be super helpful. Like you could play f4, but then there's queen h4 check available. You don't want to play knight f3. If you play bishop f4, knight c6. So you've actually overextended on the king side, but you really haven't gotten much out of it. You didn't chase opponent's knight out of the way with the g-pawn. You chased it with the e-pawn.
Interesting
So
stuff.
now the g-pawn is a little bit like you try to think, okay, what do I do with this g-pawn? Okay, I can play g5, and then what?
Yeah, interesting stuff. Okay, cool. So thank you for going back to the start of the game and kind of explaining some more basic stuff with the Najdorf. And then earlier you were describing kind of the need for this pawn break. I thought that was interesting. For those of you listening, I think that's a really important skill to look at any position and say, here's what's important about it, and here's why you should come up with the following solution. So eager to hear you talk more about this and see what you got to say about this continuing theme of pawn breakthroughs.
Sounds good. So let's go first. So after a6, f4 was played. So White is positioning e and f pawns. And to understand the Sicilian, you need to understand that White really has to find the way to attack. And this pawn formation in the center makes the attack somewhat challenging. So the only way to overcome the pawn formation d, e, and f is to advance e and f pawns and use one of the pawns to force opponent's knight away, or open the f file or e file, or both. So that's why f4 is played. And Black is very proactive. He doesn't let White accumulate the space advantage. He just basically takes back the stand and holds e5. And both players complete the castling play. And here, actually, Black started off really well. He played knight c5, immediately attacking e4. At this moment, if White actually captures the pawn on e5, he ends up losing a piece to a very simple check.
Oh, yeah, right.
So White is already being challenged in the center, and White did what they normally do in a situation like this. He played king h1. People always ask, well, why do they need to play king h1? Usually to avoid some kind of a check along a7, g1 diagonal.
That move actually threatens to win the pawn. Yeah.
Yeah, he now does. And Black did a move that is actually a mistaken move. It seems like a normal move, a move that protects the pawn. But right here, he actually missed out on the opportunity for the pawn break. You should have played d5.
Wow.
The reason why this move is so important is because the queen actually protects the d5 square, and that's a square where you need some support.
That's
Now,
that
why
that's
is
that's
that?
quite a mayhem situation. That's a lot of tension in the center.
That's true. But now black actually has a perfect moment to strike because his development is near complete. The bishop is the only piece that's not in the game. White hasn't established any more grounds on the king side. None of the pieces are involved yet. So right now, you actually have a fair battlefield. Knight, bishop, knight, couple of pawns, knight, knight, bishop, couple of pawns, queen, queen. So here is a moment where you actually have a fair power distribution and you can actually fight. And after e takes d5, you actually can immediately capitalize on your pawn break. e4, and you win a piece.
Right, right.
You have an extra piece here in the center. So what do? The same thing is after knight takes d5, knight takes d5, once again e4, a very unpleasant fork. So what does white do? White probably needs to take on e5, and then knight takes on e4. And in this position, you can see that black is fairly well holding their own. e4 is protected really well. And if white, say, plays knight d4, tries to position the knight to the outpost, black can probably simply trade, play queen c7, trade on d3, and just play bishop e6. And you can see in this position, here's a fair amount of play. The c3 pawn is clearly not a well-positioned pawn. It's a weak pawn. The a pawn is protected by the rook, but potentially also weak. And if you look at the possibilities for the king side attack, white does have some of those, but let's say he plays queen g3, you can simply play king h8. The bishops there, the e7 and e6 bishop, protect a fair number of squares. f6, g5, h4, f5, g4, h3. All the squares where the white pieces could have potentially lined up for attack are currently defended. In the meantime, you have a very simple counterplay with the rook to c8.
Yeah, this looks about even, or even maybe better for black. Do you think black's maybe better here?
That's probably doubtful because it's relatively simple for white to defend the pawn on c3 with something like rook f3 or bishop d2.
Right.
And outside of the pawn c, there really isn't that much black can even try to attack here. Yeah. Knight in d4 is positioned really well, guards lots of squares.
Yeah.
So I think this position would be roughly balanced.
I got it. So in the game here, you said
d5 was a necessary break right here.
Right. So in the game here, black's probably thinking, yeah, d5 seems good, but why don't I wait a turn? I bet I can go queen c7.
I don't think it was even that. I think he was basically probably thinking, well, he's attacking my pawn, let me guard the pawn. So sure. Most likely, I didn't put a lot of thought into this position. He just played automatic move, queen c7.
Critical mistake.
Critical mistake, exactly. So here, Mr. Tal immediately cures that problem. Now e4 square is protected, and the moment to play d5 is clearly missed. Now if you play d5, there's 3 defenses on that square, so you're basically barking the wrong tree. There is nobody there already. So after queen e1, bishop e6 was played. Another common but nevertheless weak move. What should he have done instead? Probably bishop d7. That way, he could position himself to c6. He could potentially play b5, supporting that. So the d7 is clear, the square, there's a lot more activity. e6 is a very common square because this is where you usually got to protect d5 square. But you are immediately going to be pushed by the pawn. And now what do?
Which is interesting.
Essentially, you wasted a tempo.
Because black should have known that was going to happen, so he must have just misevaluated f5 and said, sure, you can go f5, but then you don't have any tension on e5 or anything. So it's just a bad call, I guess.
Yes, he was probably expecting something like bishop g5, in which case he would probably play bishop c6. And, probably not a super exciting position, but he didn't really feel that this was too dangerous, I guess. And even this position, I really don't like this position for black because after bishop c6, there's all kinds of interesting ideas there, even b4 maybe. So Tal, however, never missed the opportunity to create a mayhem on a chessboard. If you actually look at it, his queen is ready to join the party, but obviously queen h4 is probably not a super interesting move in a view of a potential discovery. So he immediately hits him with g4.
Kapow.
And now what do? If you go bishop c6, Then after g5, your knight does not really have that many good squares to go to. e8 or d7. Those are possible, but now you have to deal with some stuff like f6, and then followed up by queen h4. And then you know that the rook is going to join g1 in a split second. And after that, your position is going to look very, very, very difficult. So
he
I
really
think
went
at
with
that
it
point,
with G4. And how would you look at that position and go, this seems like a good time to go for it? Because the G4 there could easily be the kind of move that's too early. You know, what does Tao look at and think? Yeah, this is a good time to go for it.
well, he's probably thinking that if this guy is going to come to c6 and I play g4, then he's going to hit me with d5. And that diagonal might be my king's undoing. So I need to do this right away before this guy positions himself on c6.
Got it. Yeah.
So it's just a timing issue. And also the other thing is, for this pawn structure, g4 is actually a very common attacking play. Because what else do you really do? You cannot really overcome f6 by just going to g5 and taking it. You could go bishop g5 and queen h4, but they can probably just go back to d8 with the queen, put the bishop on c6. You know, this guy would be here, this guy would be there. And then overcoming f6 would be challenging. But pawn is kind of a perfect attacking tool.
But
It
wait a
is
second. I got another
not
question.
expensive.
He
Yeah,
he can take the pawn. You can go knight takes the pawn.
absolutely. The pawn take is probably the most obvious thing that comes to one's mind. But when you actually look at it, this isn't going to be quite as easy. Let's say he goes knight d5, and suddenly you're in a fork, and you have to play something like queen d8, which seems like almost the only move you can play. Now, after rook g1,
And this is the game continuation. Yeah.
no, this hasn't happened in the game.
Oh, okay. Got it. Mm-hmm.
You actually don't really have a lot of choices here. You kind of have to go here. And in this position, I think a variety of possibilities are in play. For instance, bishop h6 looks very interesting. Queen g3 looks very interesting. Can we try Mr. Stockfish and see what he thinks? Thinks white basically simply plays bishop h6, and the position looks very ugly.
Right.
How so? Let's say knight e8, a very obvious move. Wow.
Ooh la la.
And now, yes, we protect f6. Not really.
Wow. Whew.
And you're down 16 points, so you clearly are going to die in this position. Bishop takes g7, not a good news.
Yeah.
So you can see here that taking that pawn on g4 is a very deadly proposition. However, what do you actually do in this situation? Your best shot is probably try to delay the attack as much as you reasonably can. Had there been a bishop on c6 earlier, you would have been able to hit back with g5. And that is a big deal, actually. That move would have actually scaled Black's play on e4 in a big way.
Right.
And now you're just late. So what happened here, Mr. Tao, so d5 played. I think this was basically a desperado move. Black probably looked at all other possibilities and thought that he was losing anyway. So this is a move where
Well, this is kind of principled, right? Like
I'm
you know,
try to strike you back. Yeah.
Yeah, like if you're gonna attack on the wing, oftentimes an attack in the center is the way to go.
Yes, he's basically taking so-called correct strategic approach. But the problem is after g5, he does not have a good move. What does that mean? Well, can you take on e4 with the knight? Yes, you can, but after knight d5, you actually get forked.
Oh.
So what do? You have to go queen d6 probably, and at that point, bishop takes on e4, knight takes on e4, queen takes on e4, and finally you got yourself a really nice active position for the bishop. However, after c4, you're out of gas.
Right,
you're
right.
down a piece. You can potentially win the pawn back, but not really anything else. And in the meantime, f6 is coming up.
And that's critical, that knight d5 move. This is the only good move here for white, basically. This is huge which relates to what you said a second ago about why bishop c6 earlier was necessary.
Right. So the queen is in the wrong place in the wrong time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It should have been staying on d8, where it would have been a lot better for any kind of a d5 break because it would be away from that knight d5 business.
Cool stuff. Let's see what happened in the game.
So the game was pretty much over after this. He actually took an e4 with the pawn. There was a capture back on f6. He captured back on f6. And after knight takes e4, he counted his pieces and realized that he's short.
He resigned this. Just 2 more moves. What?
Well, what do you do here? You're down a piece. You don't really have any compensation. And realistically, the position is just a total bust.
He gave up. He quit right here. Holy smokes.
Right there.
Yeah.
Yep. Just like that. Did not want to continue that torture. Now, what realistically he could have done? He's down 3 points. Let's say he goes bishop f5. Most obvious, right?
Free pawn seems
now,
like.
rook c1, kind of making sure that the queen knows his place. What do? You have to go here to e6. Okay, a knight takes f6 check. Pawn takes back. And now the computer proposes to sack on f6 and play knight h4. I was actually thinking of something like bishop h6, but obviously this is a really cool way of winning back the piece and establishing a great knight on f5. And you have to play a rook c8, trying to kind of fight back, but after knight takes f5, you don't really have much to fight back with.
Awesome.
So if you count pawns here, 4 versus 5, 1 pawn for a piece, knight on f5, queen g3 is coming up. Yes, you can trade the pieces, maybe play king h8, but after queen e4 consolidation, knight is fully safe, b7 is weak, you don't really have much going on. And the next move, he'll probably just, play rook e1, consolidates in the center, and then look for some knight jump to finish you off.
What an awesome game! And you have another one, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have another one. So
for those of you guys in the chat or watching or anything, let us know. Did you like that one? Your comment will pop up right there, and you can be on the YouTube video. Feel free to ask questions or comment and whatnot. I may not reply to all of them, but feel free to weigh in and whatnot. But I hope you guys are enjoying this. I know I am, and I'm excited to see what we got next.
All right, so this was an example of a missed pawn break. Now we're going to review a good pawn break that was executed by Tal and the subsequent attack that happened here. Let's see, where's that game here?
That should be it.
It was actually also another Sicilian and another Sicilian Niger. And here Mr. Tal plays bishop g5. Now, this isn't really a super popular move anymore. People mostly played lines with bishop e2, bishop e3, and stuff like that. English attack, bishop e3, f3. Like this is. I know there's been lots of games played with this. Now, Southern attack isn't very popular. I think it's peak of its popularity when Nigel Short played this against Garry Kasparov. And I actually looked at those games, those 1993 World Championship match, and Short was winning in a much larger number of games than one would think, because Kasparov won the match like 4-1, but he was losing in a couple of games that were completely. Short just missed out some checkmates in time pressure. So bishop g5 is a little bit less popular move these days. I think it's because of this line. And the underlying positions are just playing crazy. I've actually studied this a few times, looked at this Bobby Fischer line, where Fischer wins the pawn, White sacks the pawn, and then tries to play the attack here, something like this. But this is too much. There's just so many complications here and so many variations that you really need to have a super great memory to compete in this position.
Makes sense. Hey, I'm curious, what do you play, by the way? Like, do you play like C4 50% of the time and like E4 30, or what do you make on what do you do on your first move usually?
I usually mix up D4 and E4. I don't really play C4. Somehow I never liked that move. I maybe tried it a couple of times, but I find the underlying position extremely boring.
You play both E4 and D4. That's interesting. Why do you change between the two?
Well, sometimes I don't really play very long games anymore, and sometimes you play a short game, you just don't have an energy for a long game.
Yeah, I
Just try to
gotcha.
cut it down to a shorter, very complex fight in the opening. You play e4. E4 is always offering more sharp and open positions than d4. D4 you play when you play against a solid player. You want to have a position where you have a bit of a pressure, but not risking that much.
Is that an important skill for players to develop at like the intermediate class level to be able to play both E4 and D4, or is it better to really dig in deep to either or?
I would say until you get to about an expert player should stick to one line, E4 or D4, whatever fits your fancy, whatever makes you more comfortable. If you are attacking player, play E4. If you're more positional, like quieter positions, play D4. Once you get to about 1900 to 2000 level, you can kind of broaden your repertoire, and you can see that top players pretty much play anything. You can play E4, D4, C4, Knight f3, or whatever, but they have a tremendous amount of skill and excellent memories, so they can afford to play different versions.
You
They
guys
just simply remember things a lot better.
You guys hearing that? These are like study gems. These are like free pieces of information we're just giving you guys. So we'll have a donate link in the description as well. But this is some top tier lesson stuff. So I hope you guys are enjoying it. We're giving this out for free. So share it and watch more of them too.
Oh, enjoy it. Now, the next couple of moves are actually very interesting. Like this line is not played anymore. This is so-called Pologayevsky variation. I think the last time we took a look at the game between Pologayevsky and Tal that was won by Pologayevsky. This is a super duper sharp variation. Very, very complicated with many, many lines going 20 moves deep. I honestly don't remember why this line isn't played anymore. I think it was popular like in late 70s and early 80s when Polgayevsky played it very often. But the variations are mind-boggling, and my guess is most people don't want to play this because you can probably get some really super sharp computer and analyze this thing 20 moves out until somebody gets checkmated.
You just win the game at
Now,
home, basically. Yeah.
yeah, the people don't really like the positions anymore where you can have some if somebody has a better computer than you are and stronger program, they can just basically checkmate you sitting at home
Yeah.
and just come and execute in person.
Yeah.
So what's the underlying trick of this variation? Actually, this is it right here. E5 and Queen C7.
That hangs the knight. What?
It hangs a knight, but the idea here is if you take this guy here, he plays check,
Yikes.
and then after bishop e2, he comes back with queen g5. And this is a really crazy looking position where black only played pawns and queen moves like a beginner.
Yeah.
But believe me, this is actually quite crazy. And the whole thing is mind boggling. I've played this in speed chess against some players with white. It's very easy, unless you're really skilled in this and know this line really well. It's very easy to lose on time.
Yeah.
Just the number of picks available on every move is astronomical. You need to look at just about anything. Castling here for white, bishop f3, knight e4, take on b5 with a knight or bishop. So there's just a lot of choices here, and very easy to kind of fall asleep on this and think and think and think and then realize, wow, I'm out
No,
of time.
no kidding. Yeah.
Very, very complicated position. I think queen d3 here is a main line, kind of keeping both options open, queenside castling and kingside castling, and preparing knight e4. But the position is, again, very, very complex. Just to give you some idea what can be played.
I mean, black is so behind in development. Is this? I mean, how is this not just like losing for black?
I don't know, tell me about it. Well, if you actually think about this and you think, okay, where do I actually make a breakthrough? D file. Well, D7 square is protected 3 times, D8 square is protected once and twice. And you just don't have that many pieces near his position. Even though the position is wide open, at the same time, there is still quite a few pieces in defense. Right now, for instance, he's threatening queen takes D4, trading queens and being up a pawn. And his pawn structure is actually set up in a very protective way.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get to D5 with the knight. If you go to B5, there's going to be another piece sack. And
And
Your bishop on e2 is not positioned super well.
and it's so interesting because this is something we talked about before, where like in a given game, if there's a huge lead in development, you would kind of think, oh, this player has a huge advantage. But one criteria that you point out there is that, well, if there's not a way to actually invade or break through or win something, it's not necessarily the case that just because there's a lead in development that you automatically win. And yeah, exactly like you point out, there just isn't something like Queen D8 right here. And it's going to take probably a while to get going with G4 and everything. But still, I mean, if you asked me, before you said this is a balance, I would definitely think this is much better for white. That blows my mind.
Well, we can ask.
It's even. It's dead even. This is maybe better for black. What?
Well, the
What?
computer says that white is up about a point,
Oh, okay.
um, with some very tricky stuff like Queen E4.
Man.
So Queen E4, Bishop takes D4, Queen takes A8,
Oh
Bishop
man.
Bishop E5, and Queen F4 check, King B1, Bishop C3. Who likes to play this position? Queen F4, King B1, Bishop C3. Raise your hand.
And that's why you said this.
Um,
This can just you can lose on time because there's so much to be thinking about.
yeah, one of the problems that I always had was lines like this. I always think about this. Okay, do I really want to play this? I know that I like to think and I like to calculate, and I know I'm going to be losing in top half of the games
Yeah.
because the number of moves available is just simply mind-boggling. So the computer thinks that white is better by 1 point. Possibly so, but I've been to many Sicilian battles, and I can say it was a dark square bishop like this in the middle of the board. This counts can be misleading. It's probably easy for the computer to see how white's going to regroup and set up an attack in a few moves, but for a normal player, a common individual, so to say, this would be actually a challenge.
And it's interesting, it's like really strong players like yourself, because you're among the top 100 in the country. A lot of times players like yourself will really take the what the engine says with a grain of salt. Because you guys can really pierce through and figure out if maybe it's not right. And in some instances, I've seen you suggest a margin of error of even up to a full point. And so that's just kind of an interesting thing that I've noticed is that you want to take it with a grain of salt. As you get better and better, you want to formulate your own opinion, independent of what the engine says.
Correct. You always want to use your head because if you always rely on the engine and you don't really analyze anything by yourself, you don't have the engine during the game.
Right.
So here, actually, the engine says that G takes F6 is a better move. It actually makes sense. Maybe not letting white castle queenside actually a much better undertaking. So going back to the game, what happened in the game was actually, again, a fairly popular move. After Queen C7, Queen goes to E2. So going back to the original theme here is a pawn break. Now, when is a good time to do a pawn break? Generally speaking, as soon as you're prepared, so to say, but ideally when you are ahead in development. Because if you let black make a few more moves, Bishop E7 and Bishop B7, he's going to be as prepared for the battle as you are. So right here, white has 3 pieces out and a couple of pawns in the center. Black has 1 piece out, a couple of pawns in the center and 1 on the side. So this is a great moment to play E5, right here. So you can see that in this position, what this pawn break gives to a white player. Obviously a lot of space, number one.
Not a free knight. We learned that a second ago.
Very good. Not a free knight for sure, but a lot of space. And the key thing for the space here is you actually get access to E4 square, F3 square, F4 square. So there's a variety of squares you actually get access to. And in this particular case, he castles queenside immediately. The D5 is critically important. And at this very moment, he is actually probably considering moves like knight D takes B5, as well as knight D5 here, with the idea to meet after that move, pawn break is E6.
This is super tactical.
Super tactical, and additionally, that move with the idea of pawn takes, knight takes, and then C7 and D6 square need to be watched. So these things are sort of what they say, kind of floating in the air. Would knight E5 here be a good move? Clearly not. That loses like in a couple of moves. Takes, and here you are. Take my queen. If you take my queen, you get checkmated.
Man, look at that.
Very nice. It's a great example of using open files generated by the pawn break. So what did black do? Probably the only possible move, bishop d7. It's always been my experience that if you actually put the fianchetto pawn up, you really need to kind of fill in the blob. Otherwise, your rook is going to be a tactical matter to somebody. And here, Mr. Tal played, I would say, a Tal sacrifice. The computer actually values queen g4 the highest. But Mr. Tal gave up his knight.
Wow. That's a tall-like move.
And now he played queen g4. So obviously, threat of checkmate in 1 is a very unpleasant business.
2, yeah.
What are the defensive possibilities? Can we play knight c5? Possibly so. In that case, we need to look at rook d8 check. That's going to have to give up back the queen. And yes, we do have a fair number of pieces for it, but after b4, we have to retreat with a knight. And since we do retreat with a knight, now e6 pawn is compromised. And after something like the computer says bishop g3, and white keeps the attack. It also likes a3, I guess, with the idea of queen takes c6.
And it's balanced here. It's balanced.
Slightly better for white. Slightly better for white. I kind of felt like in this position, knight c5 is always a better defense, because a lot of times the alternatives just don't look that good, because you need to get the second knight out, and the knight on d7 is not letting the other knights come out. So knight c5 kind of a good idea where you protect the pawn and you prepare knight d7, so the rook is going to defend the bottom rank as well. So I haven't actually looked at the d4 move here. I'm assuming this is no good for some reason. But maybe the computer says, well, give back that piece and fight it off.
Wow.
And finally, you're kind of in a competitive shape. You've got the c file opened up against his king. Materially speaking, equal number of pawns. Still a very crazy position. Very crazy position. So, and again, he actually, his approach was very passive, and the passive approaches frequently lose. In the Sicilian, you have to be proactive and you have to counterattack all the time. If you're not thinking about counterattack, don't play Sicilian. Sicilian is opening for players that are always looking for a straight back. This is not one of those ideas where he hits you in the cheek, you put up another one. It's just the other way around. You hit him back into another cheek. So you're going to play knight c5 here.
That's interesting. That's kind of quotable right there.
Yeah, he played queen to b6, and that ended up pretty much a losing move immediately. What else he could have done was queen e5. Kind of putting your...
But then you open up the e file. Rook e1's going to be coming soon.
Yes, putting your head into the lines.
Then or whatever, yeah.
I was looking at bishop b5 with the idea of rook h to e1. Does that work? Just kind of curious. It's kind of a fun-looking move. Like sack this bishop, and then put rook h to e1.
Definitely worth looking at if you're, seeing this over the board or whatever, yeah.
I think this looks great. h5, unfortunately, prevents white from winning anything immediately.
Wow.
You can win this pawn, but he escapes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see a checkmate here, do you?
Nope.
You notice how that bishop protects really important squares, f3 and e4, usually used by white queen.
Yeah.
So very nasty counterattack here. And black actually has better chances here. I'm looking at this position. You can kind of see that he clearly survived the attack and has plenty of pieces to fight. So queen takes e5 would have been a better move. Now Tal probably bishop g3 would have been a good move. And after bishop e7 takes rook e1, h5 once again. Notice that counterattacking move that comes up all the time.
Yeah.
Queen b4, queen c5, queen f4. I think the position would have been still dangerous but competitive. Dangerous but competitive. That would be my assessment. I don't see immediate checkmate, but at the same time, I realize it's going to be a very long time before I can say that black is safe.
I mean, this game is such a brain buster. There's so much happening here. I want to add, by the way, if anyone's in the chat and would like to play, we may have time for a chance to do that first come first serve basis. If you'd like to do so, you could just say like I'm interested in the chat. But we got plenty more of this game to look at, so brace yourself. This one's a brain buster for sure.
Indeed, it is. Again, a very, very complex position. So the game actually did not continue very long from here because Black committed sort of like a cardinal sin of Sicilian. He did not think of a counterplay, defended very passively. Yes, he did defend e6 pawn, but there he goes. He really didn't.
Yeah, well.
Now you probably realize that he doesn't really have defense for e6. And once the king is chased around, that was actually my favorite move of the game.
Yeah.
Now, if you think about this, the normal person thinks, well, let me take on d6 and see what happens, right? That's what most players would do and probably feel very happy about this position. But after knight f6 or queen e3 is probably bad, but knight f6 probably still a win. I still feel like this position is a win. But Tal probably saw this in advance. He probably decided, well, let me finish this thing in a spectacular fashion.
Yeah.
Bishop c4 threatens mate on f7. And now the rook enters the fray and the game is over.
He might have looked at that first before even looking at e takes d6.
Yeah, I actually looked at e takes d6 when I looked for this game. I didn't really see anything wrong with that move because I kind of think about it. Well, next move is what, bishop e7. How bad can this be?
Right.
I don't really see any defensive moves here. Realistically, I think this would have been a winning move either way. I don't really see anything Black can do here.
And it's got even a forced checkmate, like Peter is saying. Would you settle for that one, or would you still investigate bishop c4 if you had enough time on your clock, or would you just go, that's a win?
If I had enough time on my clock, I would have looked at bishop c4 because, when you have a chance in a position like this, there aren't really that many moves to calculate. If you actually think about this, after bishop c4, how many moves does Black really have? Not that many. So, it'd be a shame not to try to take that chance.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the only move I'm thinking about is, can you do queen f2 and basically kind of give me that queen back and delay my plans?
Not with those bishops cutting in there, no way.
No, the bishops will just kill him.
Yeah.
So the computer suggests the best move, queen g1. Okay, well, let's do that one.
Queen g1.
But we're not going to work on that.
Yeah.
Right? We're just going to take its word it's a bad position.
Throw a little speed bump in there.
Yeah, that was actually pretty fun. And after bishop got taken, rook f1 wins the game. And here he gets another sack right there.
Wow, cool stuff. What a game. Man, cool.
Fun game.
I like it.
Really nice. Under 20 moves.
I like it.
It actually also falls into a miniature column as well. It's a miniature as well as the pawn break.
Yeah.
But going back to the pawn break, it's kind of the moment here that we want to kind of focus on because that's our main subject here. It's a great game, beautiful sack, but the main subject here is a pawn break. Again, so when do we make a pawn break? Ideally, when we actually have a development advantage, because that's the best time to make a pawn break. Remember, better development will cover a lot of scenes. A lot of other things that are not right in the position are compensated for better development.
Right.
And the better time to open the position is always when you're ahead in development, because that's when your pieces have a chance to overpower the opposing army, because there's simply more of them in the game. It's simple as that. So right now, best time to play e5. Now, if you're Black and if you're not that super excited about playing something like this, just play Bobby Fischer's bishop e7. This is how Bobby used to play this line.
It was interesting too, that G4 example. We saw some of that with the Curious attack early on, but I think that was really, really telling, that moment where you had to go G4, and it was so critical that the bishop, on D7 wasn't able to cover D5. So not only do you want to time it just in general when you're ahead in development, but sometimes timing, just on one move difference can be, huge stuff. So it's not an easy subject to master. That's why we got a whole series on it. So definitely check those out.
Absolutely. So, and again, like I said, for black player who plays knight operation, this line here that Fischer used to play still is considered top notch and still a very good system. And you can see here a stable center, all pieces in the game. You're protected against the pawn break a5 really well. And eventually you're going to play b5 on the next move and bishop b7 was the counterplay on the queen side. So here you're kind of keeping your opponent at bay and say, hey, 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 hang in there. I
Right.
got the center here, not going through. So White would have to kind of prepare his pawn break again, playing probably something like bishop d3, rook h e1, but that's going to take time and allow black to develop as well.
Yeah, cool stuff. We didn't have any volunteers for the game. I think mid afternoon is sort of tepid attendance, but those of you guys watching this on the VOD or the YouTube stream, make sure you tune in next time. And then you can play against international master. I think we'll just kind of end it on a high note. Anything else you'd like to add about this game? Some concluding thoughts to wrap it up.
Yes, yes. Always develop your pieces and try to strike before your opponent does.
Cool, good stuff. Well, thank you so much for joining the recording and everything. And when are we gonna have the next one out? Probably next few days or
Probably
something.
next week.
Yeah, cool stuff. All right,
We'll
thank you
talk to you
guys.
soon.
Yeah.